One of the most frequent questions I get from other photographers and videographers is, hey Josh, how did you start shooting destination weddings? And are there any practical steps that I can take if I'm looking to start shooting destination weddings as well? Over the past decade, I've had the amazing privilege of shooting some incredible weddings all over the US and even internationally. And what I want to do today is just walk you through my story about how I got started doing that. And I want to tell you my story because honestly, I feel like my story is probably pretty similar to yours. I'm not from some big city. I'm not super well connected with a bunch of different people who want to get married in epic locations. I literally just had to put in the hard work to brand myself as a travel photographer and videographer, and I totally believe that you can do that as well. Now, that being said, even though I've been doing this for 10 years or so, I still feel like my career is in its infancy and I still have so many things I'm trying to grow into and learn. But I do feel like over the last years, I've gained some knowledge and gained some experience that hopefully can be helpful for you if you're looking to start shooting destination weddings. So for those of you who don't know me at all, I'm from a pretty small beach town in West Michigan, right on the shores of Lake Michigan. And it's a beautiful town. We have some incredible beaches, and that definitely brings in some weddings during the year, just some pretty touristy weddings. People want to get married on the beach. But other than that, we're not really a destination wedding town at all. And honestly, the wedding market here is pretty conservative. And so when I first jumped into the wedding market here in West Michigan, 10 years ago, I realized very quickly, all right, I need to brand myself as something different than this. I need to completely change my style. And I really need to brand myself as a travel destination wedding photographer and filmmaker, but how the heck do I even do that? So the first thing I realized I needed to do was just start traveling myself. I needed marketing content of me in the types of locations where I wanted to shoot weddings. Even if I didn't have a couple in those photos, I needed to have myself with my camera in a location that I would want to shoot in. And so in the fall of 2016, I called up one of my friends and said, hey, listen, I will pay all of your expenses if you will come on this trip with me. I'm going to fly out to California for a few days and I will pay for your flight and for the car and for the hotel and for all the food and all that. If you will just bring your camera and take a bunch of pictures and video of me in these locations with my camera. And so in November of 2016, that's exactly what we did. We bought plane tickets and we flew out to California for a few days and just explored up and down the coast in some incredible locations that I had scouted on Google Maps and Instagram and Pinterest beforehand, and just got a bunch of marketing content images of me with my camera in these locations. Then I basically rebuilt my website, promotional videos, graphics, marketing content, all that with those photos from that trip, and started using that to push myself as a travel photographer and videographer. In October of 2017, I took another trip, this time to Seattle. I attended a workshop out there, which was awesome to network with other creatives. There was a couple styled shoots at that workshop, which allowed me to actually get couples in front of my camera. That was hugely helpful for me. And then after that trip, I actually extended the trip, had a few more friends come out and join me, and we just drove all around the Pacific Northwest, capturing more content of me with my cameras that I could use for marketing and promotional content. And the connections I made at that workshop were actually pretty incredible because the next month, a photographer I met at that workshop asked me to come out to California to help them host a workshop they were doing for other photographers. So I flew out to Palm Springs, again, more styled shoots, more networking, more content of myself traveling. And then again, at the end of that Palm Springs trip, I extended the trip, did some more exploring, and captured even more content that I could use to brand myself. And then 2 months later, in January of 2018, I took another trip, and this was basically a destination styled shoot of my own. I had some friends that were getting married, and I just approached them and said, hey, listen, what if we drive out to Colorado? I take you to some incredible locations in the Rocky Mountains, and we basically do this destination engagement session where we spend 6 days driving out there, shooting in the mountains and all that kind of stuff. We're going to photograph and film the entire trip. You're going to come away with some amazing images, and then I'm going to be able to use this as marketing content to promote myself in the destination wedding market. And so in January of 2018, we took that trip out to Colorado for 6 days. And crazy enough, even though it wasn't a wedding, that one specific job that I did turned into multiple other weddings down the road. So really from November of 2016 to January of 2018, for just over a year, I just traveled as much as I possibly could, learning how to travel solo, learning how to plan trips, learning how to scout locations, learning how to travel with camera gear, networking with other creatives, and just kind of building connections across the industry. And it paid off because in 2018, I booked my first paid destination wedding. But the work definitely didn't stop there because even though I was starting to get paid to travel, starting to get paid to shoot these destination weddings, I would still continue to put in a bunch of extra work to continue to push my brand even further. I would do things like adding on additional adventure sessions or day before sessions, adding on free rehearsal coverage if I knew I was going to be there the day before and I just didn't want to hang out at my Airbnb. I would add on additional content to provide additional value for the couples so they would be even more likely to refer me to their friends and family and all that. I would extend trips so I could capture additional content to include in their film, or even just capture additional content of myself so I could brand myself even more effectively. And obviously throughout all of these trips, I would continue to share and just vocalize to the people who were watching me on Instagram, on other social media platforms, on my website, that I was traveling for these weddings and that this is the kind of work that I wanted to create. So in a nutshell, that's my story and how I kind of got started shooting destination weddings. And really, if you look at it, it was about 1.5 years of like solid effort of just taking trips, planning trips on my own, learning how to travel, learning how to scout locations, learning how to travel with camera gear and what kind of camera gear to bring, communicating with other people that these are the kind of jobs that I wanted to create, connecting with other industry peers and building that network of people who could refer things to me, and building my own styled shoots where I would take this couple out to Colorado for a few days because I wanted to capture that kind of content that I could use to showcase that work for other people, just to prove that I could shoot these kind of jobs. And after about 1.5 years, that started the ball rolling, and really it hasn't stopped since. So that's really my story in a nutshell, just so you can kind of get an idea of how I got started in this industry. But what I want to do now is break that story down into like 9 tangible, practical steps that you can take if you're looking to get started in the destination wedding industry yourself. Now, these tips are obviously based on my story, and you can tweak these to your story and your particular experience, but hopefully this will kind of give you a little bit of a framework, at least of what I did that definitely worked for me. And hopefully if you tweak this a little bit or just take it for exactly what it is, hopefully this will work for you as well. So the first practical step is just to become a traveler yourself. Nobody's going to book you for a destination wedding if they don't think that you travel, if they haven't seen you traveling yourself. So if you already are traveling, grab some of the content from those trips and just showcase the fact that you do travel. Or if you haven't traveled, maybe you have to do what I did and just book some trips yourself. Get out there, go through the reps of going to the airport, figuring out what it takes to pack camera bags, bring camera stuff with you. If you want to shoot travel weddings, you have to become a traveler yourself. The second practical step is when you're on those trips, when you are traveling, create branding content that you can use to market yourself as a travel photographer or filmmaker. Whether you do what I did and ask a friend to come along with you so they can photograph and film you in these locations, or maybe you just pack a tripod and an extra camera, either way, make sure that you have content of yourself in these locations so that you can put those on your website, you can have those on your social media accounts, you can use those in your branding guides and your pricing guides and all that, so that people can see very clearly, I want to shoot these travel weddings, and here are some photos of me in my camera in the kind of locations where I want to shoot weddings. That moves us on to step 3, which is to strategically attend content days and workshops. That workshop I attended out in Seattle was one of the most transformative workshops in my career because it allowed me to network with other creators who then would refer jobs to me. In fact, one of the first destination weddings I ever booked was a referral from one of the photographers I met at that workshop. And actually, crazy enough, I'm actually shooting a wedding in Wyoming in the Tetons next weekend with a photographer that I met at that workshop. But even beyond the networking component, a lot of these workshops also include some sort of like content creation or styled shoot or something where you can gather content of couples in these locations that you can use for your portfolio. This was honestly huge for me because I had no idea how to book models or find a couple that would be willing to model for me in these locations. And so attending a workshop where I could not only network with other people who wanted to shoot destination weddings as well, but also gather some content that I could use in my portfolio to show people what I could actually do if they gave me a chance was really, really huge for me. The fourth step that I took was just to kind of ramp up that content and workshop day by designing my own styled shoot myself. Workshops and content days are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but there's something about literally designing your own experience where you get to literally call all the shots yourself, and you have to like put in all the work and all the research and all the time to design that experience that can be an incredible catalyst for growth in your career. For me, that first styled shoot I did was that multi-day Colorado trip I took, and honestly the content I captured on that trip turned into so many additional bookings down the road just because I had literally designed exactly what I wanted to do and is able to really market to specific types of clients. Hosting your own shoot also really requires you to do a bunch of research and like really plan things out strategically. And that leads us to step number 5 is you really need to become the expert on travel. Doing so much travel yourself helps you really become familiar with the travel process, with different locations and where you would recommend shooting certain types of things. And as I continued to travel more, I started getting more DMs and emails from people saying, hey, we would love to get married in some cool location. What would you recommend? Going through all the reps yourself and becoming an expert on the travel process allows you to really feed that information to couples who might be interested in doing a destination wedding, but just kind of fear the process, don't know what it's like to travel. And if you can come in as the expert and say, hey, listen, I've done this before, I've done this a bunch of times, here's how I would pack, here's how I would recommend traveling with certain kinds of things, here's location advice, here's timing advice, that's a huge leg up that you have if you've already done that kind of stuff and can be the expert. And that leads me to step number 6, and that's that you need to communicate your desire to travel with potential clients. I seriously cannot stress this enough. And just to give you 2 examples, 2 of the biggest weddings that I've ever shot were actually initially booked as like country club weddings in West Michigan. And then those couples changed their venue based on conversations that we had. I kid you not, like this wedding in Hawaii, initially the couple reached out and said like, hey, we're going to book the Muskegon Country Club, which is just a little country club in West Michigan here. And I said, okay, cool. And we had a whole conversation about it. I talked about travel. I talked about how I love shooting destination weddings, why I love shooting those kind of weddings, the kind of process, the kind of experience that can bring. And then we booked a country club and we called it good. And then a few months later, they reached back out and said, hey, we're starting to get into the wedding planning process. The stuff that you talked about really resonated with us. We decided we're going to say, screw the traditional wedding. We're going to do like a multi-day elopement in Hawaii, and we'd love for you to come with us. The same thing happened with the Scotland couple. They actually reached out to me, and in their initial inquiry, they were like, hey, we know you typically travel for weddings. We know those are the kind of weddings that you like to do. That's not the kind of wedding we're having. We're just doing like a little kind of country club wedding on a lake in Michigan, but we'd still love to have you. We love your style. If you're willing to do it, we'd love to have you there. Again, I talked to them about destination weddings versus local weddings and country club weddings. We had that whole conversation, and then they booked me for the country club. Then a few months later, they reached out again and said, hey, the conversations that we had were really sticking with us. We actually decided we're going to do a small intimate wedding in Scotland for a few days. Any chance you'd be willing to come along for that? And so that's how that wedding happened. But just being willing to communicate honestly with people is so, so huge. You can't expect potential couples to just know that you want to shoot travel weddings. You have to make sure to communicate that to them. And even if they don't initially book you for that, sometimes that could turn into a travel wedding down the road. And that leads me to step number 7, and that's to offer discounts for great opportunities. Now, I'm all for getting paid what you're worth and making sure that you're not just giving away content for free. But when you're first trying to get started in the travel industry, you have to be honest with yourself. If you haven't shot a lot of travel weddings, if you're not experienced in that field, you're probably going to have to offer some discounts to be able to shoot those jobs and then use the content you captured from that job to market other future opportunities. Obviously, attending content days and workshops or even designing your own styled shoot can be a great way to get some content, but nothing can truly compare to having an actual wedding in your portfolio in an amazing location. And if you have to offer some discounts or shoot for travel costs or whatever that looks like for the first 1 or 2 of those, and that's going to get you into the industry, I am wholeheartedly for that. Case in point for me, I had an incredible lead pop into my inbox pretty early on into my travel wedding career, and I knew that the wedding was going to lead to some incredible networking opportunities. I knew the person I would be filming the wedding for was very connected on the West Coast, and that would open up a ton of other opportunities for me. And so I offered to do the wedding for just travel costs alone. In fact, I don't even think it was my full travel costs. I think I actually lost a little bit money on this wedding, but I showed up for the wedding. I even added on some additional free sessions afterwards. I spent a ton of time capturing really amazing content for this couple. I put my heart and soul into this project, and I marketed the crap out of it once I had that wedding film done. And that wedding has turned into so many jobs all up and down the West Coast. It's created additional connections with the other vendors who then referred me to even more jobs. And so while I definitely wouldn't recommend always offering discounts on your services, when you're first getting started, definitely consider offering a discount, shooting it for travel costs, because you never know what that's going to turn into down the road. The 8th step is something I've already talked about, but that's just going above and beyond when you get great opportunities. Again, I'm all for getting paid what you're worth, but there's something to be said about going above and beyond, adding an additional session for free, staying a little bit longer, extending your trip so you can capture some additional content to use in the project. Whatever that looks like for you, going above and beyond for a client not only creates more content for you to be able to share, but then creates a really, really happy client that wants to share you with all their friends and family. I am always an advocate for going above and beyond, for over-delivering on what you promise, and I can't stress enough how much it helps build and establish a brand when you're going above and beyond for clients who then refer you to everybody else, and you've captured amazing content by going above and beyond that you can then use to market your services to future paying clients. And that leads me to step 9, which is the final step in this whole thing, which is to build industry connections. Building great connections with people in the industry is one of the best ways to network beyond the network that you have access to. Some of my favorite projects have been referrals from other photographers or videographers, planners, florists, other vendors that I've worked with who've seen my work and seen the work that I did going above and beyond on a specific project and then referred me to somebody else. Building great connections with people in the industry, the vendors that you're working with on a consistent basis, is just a fantastic way to just open and expand your network into a region that you really don't have a network in, but building connections with that vendor then adds their network to your network, which then can turn into future jobs down the road. So hopefully that's been a helpful look at my story and how I got started in the destination world. I have by no means like made it in this industry, and there's so many things I'm still learning and growing in, but hopefully this has been a helpful look at the process I used to get started in this industry and provided you some practical tips to do the same. As always, if you have any additional thoughts, comments, or questions, please leave those down below, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.